The rain had been falling since morning. The streets were wet, the air smelled fresh, and the world seemed quieter than usual. David Cole sat in the back seat of his black luxury car, staring out of the window. Beside him sat his 8-year-old daughter, Emily. She was small, pale, and beautiful, but she had never spoken a single word in her life. Emily was born mute. No one knew why. Doctors had run every test, but the answer was always the same. She would never speak. David loved her more than anything, yet there was always a sadness between them. They lived together, but their conversations were one-sided. He spoke, she listened. She wrote on a notepad when she needed to tell him something. It wasn't the same as hearing her voice. Today, for some reason he couldn't explain, David decided to take Emily to a cafe. Not a big, fancy place like he usually went to, but a small, quiet one on the corner of a narrow street. It was the kind of place you could walk past every day without noticing. The driver stopped in front. David opened the door and stepped out. Holding an umbrella for Emily, she clutched her small pink bag and followed him inside. The cafe smelled like fresh coffee and warm bread. Soft music played in the background. A few customers were sitting at tables, reading or talking in low voices. Emily's eyes wandered around the room. She liked it here. They chose a table near the window. A young waitress approached them. She was maybe in her mid-20s, with smooth brown skin, warm brown eyes, and a kind smile. "Our name tag," said Maya. "Good afternoon. What can I get for you?" she asked politely. David ordered his usual, a black coffee. Then he looked at Emily. She stared at the menu, her small fingers tapping nervously on the table. David was about to order something for her, like he always did when it happened. Maya bent down slightly, her smile widening. Then her hands began to move. Emily froze. Her eyes grew wide, her lips parting in surprise. David watched, confused, as Maya's hands danced in the air. It took him a moment to realize what she was doing. She was speaking in sign language. Emily's entire face lit up, brighter than David had ever seen. Her hands moved quickly, answering Maya with speed and excitement. The two of them signed back and forth, faster and faster, smiling and laughing silently. David sat there, unable to speak. He had never seen Emily like this. Never. It was like watching a flower bloom in front of him. She wasn't shy. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't writing her thoughts on a notepad. She was talking without sound, but with more life than ever. Before, he felt his throat tighten. His chest ached. For years, he had dreamed of seeing her communicate like this, and now? A stranger had done in seconds what he couldn't do in 8 years. Maya glanced at him, then back at Emily. Her hands slowed, and she signed something that made Emily's expression change. The joy faded into a softer, almost serious look. Emily signed something quickly, her little hands moving with urgency. Maya's smile faded slightly. She looked at David, her eyes more serious now. "Sir?" she said quietly, almost as if she didn't want others to hear. "I think we need to talk. It's about your daughter." David blinked. "About what?" Maya hesitated. "She's telling me something. Something unusual." Emily tugged at Maya's sleeve, signing again, faster this time. Maya turned back to her, watching her hands closely, nodding slowly. Then Maya looked at David again. "She's asking me if I know the woman in the yellow dress." David felt his breath catch. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. That was impossible. Emily had never been around anyone who dressed like that. In fact, the only person David could think of was Maya. Leaned in closer. "She says this woman talks to her in her dreams." David's heart thudded in his chest. The cafe around them seemed to fade into silence. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't explain, a mix of fear, hope, and confusion all at once. He looked at his daughter. She was smiling again, her hands moving happily as she signed to Maya. David couldn't understand a single thing they were saying, but deep down, he knew. This was the day everything was going to change. David couldn't stop staring at Maya. Her hands moved with such skill. So naturally, as if she had been signing all her life. Emily was completely locked into the conversation, her small fingers moving in bursts of excitement. David cleared his throat. "I didn't know you knew sign language," he said quietly. Maya smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "My younger brother is mute," she explained. "We grew up in a rough neighborhood. Kids made fun of him. Teachers didn't understand him. So I learned sign language to be his voice. It was the only way to protect him." David nodded slowly. It made sense now, but still, the way Emily had connected with her in seconds felt unreal. 8 years of quiet walls between him and his daughter. And a stranger had stepped in like she held the key. Emily tapped Maya's hand, signing something quickly. Maya's smile faded a little. She signed back slowly, as if asking a careful question. Emily nodded hard, her eyes bright and certain. Maya looked at David, hesitating. "She's telling me more about the woman in the yellow dress," Maya said softly. David's stomach tightened. "What did she say?" "She says the woman visits her in dreams. She talks to her, plays with her." And Maya paused, looking a little uneasy. "She says the woman tells her things, personal things, about you." David froze. "What kind of things?" Emily signed again, her hands moving fast. Maya's eyes widened a little. "She says the woman told her. You used to sing to her before she was born." David's heart skipped a beat. He had done that softly, at night, when his wife was pregnant. He had never told anyone how. How could she know that? He whispered. Maya shook her head. "I don't know, but there's more." Signed something to Emily. And Emily answered immediately. "She says the woman wears a yellow dress every time she visits, and she always smells like flowers. White flowers." David's breath caught. His wife Anna had loved wearing white jasmine perfume. She even wore it in the hospital when Emily was born. This was impossible. Emily had been just a baby when Anna died. She couldn't remember any of that. David rubbed his forehead. Maybe she saw pictures. Maybe she overheard something. Maya's voice softened. Maybe? Or maybe she's just remembering in her own way. For a moment, no one spoke. Emily sat there happily signing to Maya. Unaware of the storm brewing inside her father's mind, finally David asked, "Can you teach me the signs?" Maya's eyes warmed. "Of course, I can teach you the basics today." They started right there in the cafe. Maya taught David simple signs. Hello, thank you, I love you. His hands felt clumsy, but Emily's face lit up every time he tried. And then, in the middle of their lesson, Maya suddenly asked David, "Did your wife know sign language?" David blinked. "She learned a little before Emily was born," said. "It might be useful one day." "Why?" Maya gave a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Emily signs like someone taught her, not like someone who learned it on her own. She uses little habits, movements that match someone's style. It's not mine, it's not school-taught. It feels personal." David's hands went still. "You mean?" Maya nodded slowly. "Maybe someone has been teaching her, just not in the way we think." The rain outside had stopped, but the cafe felt even quieter now. David looked at Emily. She was giggling silently, her small fingers dancing in the air as if she was telling Maya some grand joke. He thought of Anna, the yellow dress, the jasmine perfume, the gentle hands. And for the first time in years, he felt a strange mix of fear and comfort. Like something beyond his understanding was reaching into his life. Maya glanced at the clock. I have to get back to work, but bring her here again. I want to talk to her more. David nodded. We will. As he led Emily out of the cafe, she tugged his sleeve. She looked up at him and signed something quickly. He didn't understand the signs, but her face said enough joy, excitement, hope. When they got back into the car, David looked out at the small cafe fading into the distance. He didn't know if Maya was just a kind stranger or something more, but one thing was certain. The walls between him and Emily had just begun to crack, and deep down, he knew. The woman in the yellow dress wasn't going away. David didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The sound of rain still echoing in his ears, even though the storm had passed hours ago. The image of Emily's small hands signing to Maya played over and over in his mind. Her smile, her laughter. He hadn't seen her that alive in years. But the thing that kept him awake was the name. The woman in the yellow dress. It wasn't just a name. It was a memory. Anna, his late wife, used to have a favorite dress. Bright yellow, flowing. She wore it every summer. She'd wear it when they went to the park, when they had picnics, when the world still felt perfect, and the jasmine perfume. He could almost smell it now, soft and sweet, wrapping around him like a memory that refused to fade. But Emily couldn't know that. She had been too young, barely a year old, when Anna passed away. David had hidden the photos, thinking it would be easier for Emily to grow without constant reminders of her loss. Now he wondered if that had been a mistake. The next afternoon, David found himself driving back to the cafe. He told himself it was for the coffee. But deep down, he knew it was for Maya. Emily was practically bouncing in her seat. David had rarely seen her so eager to go anywhere. When they stepped inside, Maya noticed them instantly. She smiled warmly and waved them over to the same table. You came back, she said, setting down 2 menus. David nodded. Emily wanted to. Maya crouched beside Emily, signing a cheerful hello. Emily replied instantly, her little hands moving with confidence. It was like watching someone unlock a hidden part of her soul. David leaned forward. Did she talk about the woman again? Maya nodded slowly. Yes, she says the woman comes more often now. She says they play games, tell stories, and the woman tells her secrets. David frowned. What kind of secrets? Maya glanced at Emily, then lowered her voice. She said the woman told her about an oak tree, a big one in a park. She said it's where you gave her something shiny. David's chest tightened. The oak tree, the proposal, the silver ring he had placed on Anna's hand. He hadn't been to that park in years. Emily had never been there at all. He forced a small smile. Maybe she just imagined it. But even as he said the words, he didn't believe them. They ordered their drinks. Emily got a warm chocolate drink. She signed it herself to Maya, who praised her skills. Halfway through the meal, Maya leaned toward David. Can I ask you something personal? David nodded. Was your wife? A gentle person. Kind. David smiled faintly. The kindest. She loved children, animals. She had a way of making people feel safe. Maya nodded as if she had already guessed. Emily signs with that same softness. When she tells me about the woman, it's never scary. It's like talking about a friend. David swallowed hard. A friend who's been gone a long time. Maya's. Eyes softened. Sometimes. People we love find ways to stay with us, even if we don't understand how. David wanted to argue, to call it impossible, but Emily's bright eyes stopped him. She was happy. Happier than she'd been in a long time. Later, as they were leaving, Emily tugged David's sleeve and signed something quickly. David looked helplessly at Maya. She says the woman told her you used to read stories at night. Maya translated, and that you always ended with a kiss on her forehead. David froze. That had been his routine with Anna, not with Emily. He used to read to Anna's pregnant belly, ending each story with a gentle kiss. Emily shouldn't know that. David bent down to her level, his voice low. Emily, where do you see her? Only in dreams. Emily nodded, signing. She comes when I'm sad. She says I'm never alone. David's throat tightened. He hugged her, holding her longer than usual. That night, David sat in his study, pulling out an old photo album he hadn't opened in years. He turned the pages slowly. There was Anna in the yellow dress, standing under the oak tree. Oh, there she was, laughing, holding a bouquet of white jasmine. His hands trembled as he closed the book. Tomorrow, he decided they would go to the park. He didn't know why. But something in his heart told him it was time. The next morning, David called. Maya, I'm taking Emily somewhere important. Will you come with us? She trusts you. Maya agreed. When they met, Emily was already signing excitedly to Maya. David watched them, his mind heavy with questions. As they drove toward the park, David couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for them there. Not just memories, something more. When they arrived, the air felt different. Emily ran ahead, her small feet splashing in puddles from last night's rain. She stopped suddenly near the old oak tree. Her hands began to move. Maya translated softly. She says, this is where the woman met you. She says you gave her a promise. Here. David stood frozen, staring at the exact spot where he had asked Anna to marry him. Emily smiled up at him, her eyes full of something he couldn't name. She signed one more thing, and Maya's voice trembled as she spoke the words. She says, the woman wants you to know she's proud of you. David turned away quickly, blinking back the sting in his eyes. This was no longer just a dream. His daughter was having something, or someone was reaching across the years, and David wasn't sure he was ready for what came next. Next day, the air in the park still felt heavy when they left. David drove in silence, his mind a whirl of memories and questions. Maya sat in the back with Emily, their hands moving in easy conversation. David kept glancing at them in the rearview mirror. Emily's face was bright, her eyes alive. He realized something. She wasn't just talking to Maya. She was opening up in a way he had never seen before. When they reached home, Emily ran to her room, humming a soundless little tune, her version of happiness. Maya lingered at the door. David, she said softly, you have to keep learning sign language. The more you understand her, the more you'll realize. She's been trying to tell you things for years. David nodded slowly. I will. I don't want to miss a single word. That night, David sat with Emily in the living room. He had a sign language guide on his phone, awkwardly mimicking the shapes with his hands. Emily watched him with a smile, occasionally correcting him. Her small hands gently moved his fingers into the right positions. It felt strange at first, like learning to speak again. But when Emily's face lit up at his progress, David felt a deep warmth in his chest. Finally, he managed a clumsy sentence. I love you. Emily's eyes widened. Her hands moved quickly. I love you too. David swallowed hard, feeling an ache that was both painful and beautiful. They had just spoken to each other without a single sound, and yet it felt louder than any words he'd ever said. The next day, David returned to the cafe with Emily. He decided this place would become part of their life. Maya greeted them with a smile. Today, she seemed different, more thoughtful, almost protective. As they sat, Maya asked Emily about her dreams. Again? Emily signed a long story, full of quick movements and little giggles. Maya translated, "She says the woman taught her a special sign, one she wants to show you." Emily looked at David and slowly made a sign with both hands, a graceful twist of her fingers. David frowned. "What does that mean?" Maya hesitated. "It's not standard sign language, but it's close to an old sign for forever." David felt a shiver run down his spine. Anna used to write forever at the end of every love note she gave him. Over the next weeks, something shifted. David spent evenings learning signs from Maya and practicing with Emily. They began having full conversations about her favorite food, her little dreams, her fears. One evening, Emily signed, "I wish you smiled more." David laughed softly and signed back, "I'm learning how Maya became more than just a waitress. She was a bridge between father and daughter, and perhaps between the living and the memory of Anna." But the dreams grew stranger. One afternoon, as they sat in the cafe, Emily signed with an urgent look on her face. Maya translated carefully. "She says the woman told her something will happen soon, something important." David frowned. "What does she mean?" Maya shook her head. "Emily says the woman didn't explain. Only that you'll understand when the time comes." David didn't like the sound of that. But Emily seemed calm, almost happy about it, as if she trusted the woman completely. That night, David dreamed for the first time in years. In the dream, he was standing under the oak tree. Anna stood before him, wearing the yellow dress, smiling softly. "She needs you," Anna said, in a voice like a whisper in the wind. "You're closer now, but don't stop." When David woke, his pillow was damp. He wasn't sure if it was sweat or tears. The following morning, Emily surprised him. She walked into the kitchen, signed something quickly, and then pulled it. His hand. Maya, who had come over for their usual lesson, translated, "She says she wants to go somewhere special today." "Somewhere you've been afraid to go." David's heart skipped. "The cemetery?" he asked. Emily nodded. They drove there together, Emily holding his hand tightly the whole way. When they reached Anna's grave, Emily knelt down. Touching the cold stone gently, she began signing slowly, as if speaking to someone who was right there in front of her. Maya's voice was soft as she translated. "She says, thank you for loving her. She says she's happy we talk now. She says she'll always be watching." David's chest ached. He knelt beside his daughter, signing with trembling hands, "I miss you. I promise to be the father she deserves." Emily smiled but through Emily, through their hands, through their signs, he was hearing her again. And in that moment, he understood what Anna had meant in his dream. This wasn't just about learning to speak Emily's language. It was about breaking down the silence he'd built around his own. Heatha, days after visiting the cemetery, felt different. David noticed Emily watching him more closely, as if making sure he was keeping his silent promise. He also noticed something else. She was signing more on her own, even without Maya there. One evening, as David worked in his study, Emily came in holding an old shoebox. It was dusty edges worn from years of being tucked away in the attic. She set it on his desk, signed to open it. David hesitated. He knew what was inside. It was Anna's box, her letters, photographs, little keepsakes. He hadn't touched it since the day she died. Emily pushed it toward him again. Her eyes were steady, calm. With a slow breath, David opened it. The scent of faint jasmine rose up like a ghost. Inside were folded notes, pressed flowers, and a small notebook bound in yellow fabric. David's hands shook as he opened the notebook and froze. The first page wasn't written for him. It was written for Emily. "My little girl," it read in neat handwriting. "If you ever need me and I can't be there, I hope you feel me in the sunlight, in the wind, in the way your father loves you. And if you ever learn sign language, know that I wanted to speak to you in that way too." David's throat tightened. Emily leaned forward, touching the page gently. Then signed. I knew she was real. The next day, David brought the notebook to the cafe. Maya read the words silently, her eyes widening. "She wrote this before Emily was even born," Maya said softly. "It's like she knew." Emily signed something, her hands moving slower than usual, almost reverently. Maya translated, "She says the woman in the yellow dress told her about this book. That's why she went to the attic." David's breath caught. "She told you where it was?" he asked Emily directly. Emily nodded. "In the old wooden box," she signed. David leaned back, staring at her. How could she know that? But the attic was locked. Emily had never been inside. Maya glanced at him, her voice low. "David, whatever you believe, I think Anna is still looking out for her." From that day forward, David and Emily began a new ritual. Each night, they'd open the notebook together. Some pages were love letters to David. Others were words for the daughter Anna had never met in life. Advice. Dreams, little bits of her heart written in ink. Emily soaked up every page, every word, her fingers tracing the handwriting like she could feel her mother's touch through it. One night, Emily signed something unexpected. "I want to visit her park again." David smiled faintly. "The oak tree?" Emily nodded, adding a new sign she had learned from Maya. Memories. The next weekend, they returned to the park. This time, Emily didn't just stand under the oak tree. She sat down and pulled out a small sketch pad from her bag. She began to draw the tree, the bench, the sunlight filtering through the leaves. David sat beside her, quietly watching. When she finished, she handed him the drawing. It showed 3 people, Emily, David, and a woman in a yellow dress. David stared at it. "Emily, you've never seen her face in real life? How do you know?" Emily. Signed, "Because she's here. She comes when you smile." David felt a lump rise in his throat. He looked around, at the sunlight flickering through the branches, at the still air that seemed to hum with warmth. For a moment, he let himself believe. Over the following weeks, Maya helped them create a video diary, a way for David and Emily to sign together, recording their conversations. It wasn't just practice. It was proof, a way to see how far they had come. One evening, while reviewing the footage, Maya paused the video and zoomed in. David frowned. "What is it?" She pointed to the frame. Behind them, in the blurred sunlight, was a faint figure. The suggestion of a yellow shape. David stared at it for a long time. It could have been a trick of the light. It could have been nothing. But his heart told him otherwise. Emily was learning fast now, faster than David could keep up. Some nights, she would sign things to him that weren't just about her day. They were about feelings. One night, she signed, "I used to think you were sad all the time, but now, you're lighter." David smiled. Signing back, "You make me lighter." Emily grinned and signed something else, a motion David didn't recognize. He looked at Maya for translation. Maya smiled softly. "It means we're a family now." That night, after Emily went to bed, David sat alone with the yellow notebook. He flipped to a random page and read, "If you're reading this, David, I hope you've learned by now that love doesn't end when someone is gone. It changes, it grows, and sometimes it finds new ways to speak." David closed the book slowly. He realized Anna wasn't asking him to move on. She was asking him to move forward, and with Emily's small hands guiding his own. Finally was. The park was different that morning. The air was crisp, the sky pale blue, and the old oak tree seemed to stand taller than usual. David didn't know why Emily had insisted on coming today. But there was a seriousness in her eyes that told him it mattered. Maya had come too, at Emily's request. She walked beside the little girl while David carried a small picnic basket. When they reached the oak tree, Emily stopped. She looked around, scanning the grass, the benches, the sunlight filtering through the branches. Then she smiled faintly, as if she'd found something only she could see. Her small hands began to move in slow, careful signs. Maya translated softly, her voice low, almost reverent. She says, "The woman is here." David's heart skipped. He followed Emily's gaze, but saw nothing, just the shifting shadows and the golden light of morning. Emily knelt by the tree and placed both hands on the rough bark. She signed again, and Maya's voice trembled slightly as she spoke. "She says this is where you promised to love her forever." She says she kept her promise too. David's breath caught. He had whispered those very words to Anna the day he proposed. Emily then signed something longer, her fingers moving with precision. Maya wiped her eyes before translating. She says, "The woman wants you to stop carrying so much guilt. She says you've done enough. And she wants you to love me the way you loved her." David felt something inside him break, not in a painful way, but in a way that let the light in. He knelt beside Emily, resting a hand on her small shoulder. His own hands began to move, shaky but determined. Maya didn't translate. She didn't need to. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she read his signs. "I love you, always. You are my world." Emily's arms went around his neck instantly, holding him with surprising strength for her small frame. For a long time, they stayed like that, under the shade of the oak tree. When Emily finally pulled back, she signed one last message, her fingers slow and deliberate. Maya whispered the words, "She says the woman is smiling at us." David looked up at the branches swaying gently in the breeze. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a flash of yellow between the leaves, but when he blinked, it was gone. They spent the rest of the day there. Emily sketched in her book, drawing the tree, the sunlight, and something only she could see. Maya sat with her, helping her label the drawings in sign language so David could learn the words later. At one point, Emily handed David a drawing that made his breath hitch. It showed 3 figures under the oak tree: Emily, David, and a woman in a yellow dress holding both their hands. "You've never drawn her before," David said quietly. Emily smiled, signing. Today she stood closer as the sun began to set. The 3 of them packed up to leave. But just as they started walking away, Emily stopped again. She turned back to the tree and signed quickly, almost urgently. Maya's voice caught as she translated. She says, "This is goodbye, but not forever." She says she'll still visit in dreams when needed. David swallowed hard. "Why goodbye?" Emily signed. "Because now I have you." The words hit him harder than anything else had. That night, back home, David noticed something different about the silence between him and Emily. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was comfortable. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled because everything important had already been said with hands, with eyes, with love. After dinner, Emily brought her sketchpad over. She pointed to one last drawing she had made at the park, a small yellow heart floating above the oak tree. David signed. "What does it mean?" Emily grinned. "It means she's happy." Later, as David tucked Emily into bed, she signed one more thing. "You're smiling more now." David laughed softly. "That's because you're my reason." Emily's eyes closed with a peaceful expression. David stood there for a long moment, just watching her breathe. And though he heard nothing, he could have sworn he felt a whisper in the air, the faint scent of jasmine and a voice he thought he'd never hear again. "You did it, David. She's not alone." And The weeks after the park meeting felt lighter, like someone had quietly lifted a weight from David's shoulders. For the first time in years, he woke up without the heaviness in his chest. The house, once filled with quiet tension, now held a gentler silence, one filled with movement, with laughter that had no sound but was felt in every corner. Emily had changed, too. She moved with more confidence, her eyes brighter, her smile quicker to appear. And every day, her hands danced more, telling stories, asking questions, saying I love you without hesitation. David found himself looking forward to their conversations in sign language. They spoke about everything, her favorite colors, what she wanted to be when she grew up, even little jokes that made them both laugh. It wasn't just communication. It was connection. Maya was still a part of their lives. Stopping by the cafe table that had unofficially become their spot, or visiting their home for lessons. She had become more than a teacher. She was a friend, maybe even family. One sunny afternoon, the three of them sat outside at the cafe. Emily signed a long sentence to Maya, then turned to David with an expectant look. Maya smiled warmly. She says she wants to teach you something new, her favorite sign. Emily took David's hands gently and shaped his fingers. The movement was fluid, soft, and ended with both hands close to the heart. David looked at Maya for translation. It means home, Maya said. Not the house, not the building, but the people who make you feel safe. David's chest tightened. He looked at Emily and signed it back to her home. She grinned and signed another word, forever, that evening. David found Emily in her room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a yellow notebook in her lap. She was flipping through the pages slowly, her fingertips brushing over her mother's handwriting. David sat beside her. She looked at him and signed, I think she's happy now. David nodded, his voice low. I think so too. Emily hesitated, then signed something that made him pause. Maya wasn't there to translate, but David had learned enough to understand. She says you can be happy too. He swallowed hard. I am, because of you. Days turned into weeks, and the memories of Anna became less like sharp wounds and more like gentle, treasured keepsakes. David even brought out the old photo albums, letting Emily see pictures of her mother for the first time. They sat together on the couch as David told stories, some funny, some bittersweet. Emily listened with wide eyes, occasionally signing questions. When they reached a photo of Anna under the oak tree, Emily touched the image softly and signed, she's still there. David smiled faintly. I know. One weekend, David decided it was time for something new. He took Emily back to the park, but this time, they didn't just sit under the oak tree. They brought a small wooden bench and placed it nearby. A small plaque on the back read, For Anna, forever in our hands, our hearts, and our home. Emily ran her fingers over the words, then signed, She will like this. They sat together on the bench, sharing a quiet moment as the wind rustled through the leaves. David didn't need to see her to know Anna was there. Months later, David received an invitation from Emily's school. They were hosting a small performance, a sign language recital. For parents, Emily was going to recite a short poem she had written herself. On the day of the event, Gonry sat in the front row, his heart pounding with pride. When Emily stepped onto the stage, she looked straight at him and began to sign. Her hands moved gracefully, her expression full of life. Love doesn't need words. It speaks in eyes, in hands, in the way you stay. My voice is silent, but my heart is loud, and you hear me. David felt tears blur his vision. When she finished, the audience clapped, but he stayed still, signing to her from his seat. I hear you always. That night, as he tucked Emily into bed, she signed one more thing before closing her eyes. I don't dream of her as much now, but when I do. She's smiling. David leaned down, kissed her forehead and signed, "Me too." As he turned off the light, a faint scent of jasmine drifted through the room. He paused, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Good night, Anna," he whispered. David had once thought his life ended with the loss of his wife, but now he understood something deeper.